Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just dive straight into it, because today we're looking at one of history's most brilliant, meticulously planned examples of nonviolent resistance, the 1930 Salt March against the British Raj. It is, at its core, this incredible story of how ordinary people, armed with literally nothing but unyielding discipline and a profound philosophy, managed to challenge an entire empire.
And it's a question that honestly sounds kind of absurd on its face, right? How does a handful of mud and salt bring the world's mightiest empire to its knees? Just think about the scales here. On one side, you have the British Empire, the sprawling global superpower backed by heavily armed police, strict laws, and massive military might. And on the other side, you have salt, a humble, everyday mineral you can just find in the ocean. This is the ultimate David versus Goliath narrative, guys. And to figure out exactly how David won this one, we really have to understand the weapon he chose. All right, Section 1, the British Salt Monopoly and the 1882 Salt Act. What is truly staggering when you look back at this is just how encompassing and, frankly, restrictive this law was. The 1882 Salt Act gave the British a complete ironclad monopoly. It literally criminalized the collection and manufacture of salt by Indians. Think about that for a second. If you were an Indian citizen living right there on the coast, with the ocean literally washing up at your feet, you were legally forbidden from taking that seawater and evaporating it to make salt. You couldn't do it. Instead, you were forced to buy it from government depots and pay a heavy tax on a substance that is absolutely vital to human survival. Moving on to Section 2, the strategy of Satyagraha, or Truth and Love Force. So on January 26, 1930, the Indian National Congress publicly issues this major declaration. The goal was Purna Swaraj, meaning complete self-rule, but the real genius here lay in exactly how they planned to actually achieve it. Mahatma Gandhi chose Satyagraha. As we can see defined here, it translates roughly to truth force or love force, which meant practicing pure nonviolent resistance. See, Gandhi firmly believed that if the means you employed were impure or violent, the end result would just be ruined anyway. The goal was complete independence, sure, but the method had to be completely flawless. Which leads us to a really fascinating strategic question. Why on earth choose salt for a revolution? At the time, this choice was actually met with a ton of skepticism. Even Gandhi's closest allies, like Sardar Patel, thought it was a terrible idea. They wanted a land tax boycott instead. And the British Viceroy, Lord Irwin, he completely dismissed it, actually writing back to London that the prospect of a salt campaign certainly wasn't going to keep him awake at night. But this choice right here brilliantly illustrates why Gandhi was just a master strategist. Look, a land tax boycott, that would only affect landowners. It's a somewhat abstract political demand that could easily divide people by class. But the salt tax? Salt is right up there next to air and water as a basic necessity of life. A tax on salt affected absolutely everyone. It completely bypassed all those class divides, uniting the rich and the poor, and crucially, uniting Hindus and Muslims together against a shared, undeniable wrong. Now, to put some numbers to it, the salt tax represented exactly 8.2% of the British Raj's tax revenue. To the British, maybe that 8.2% just looked like a relatively small slice of their massive imperial pie. But taxing a daily necessity like that, it disproportionately crushed the absolute poorest citizens of India. It became this incredibly visceral daily reminder of imperial exploitation that every single Indian could relate to on a personal level. That brings us to Section 3. The 24-day march, the path to Dandi. So March 12, 1930, Gandhi departs from his Sabarmati ashram. But he doesn't just invite anyone off the street to march with him. No, he sets out with exactly 78 highly disciplined young ashram volunteers, guys who were rigorously trained in his very strict standards of nonviolence. As you can see on this timeline, it traces their epic 387-kilometer journey. Over 24 days, they walked south toward the coastal village of Dandi. They stopped in villages, slept out in the open, and gathered this just unimaginable momentum along the way. And as they marched, the procession actually became known as the White Flowing River. That's because everyone who joined wore white, homespun khadi clothing. Gandhi was smart about this. He sent scouts ahead to orchestrate his village speeches, and the crowds just exploded. Early on, near Ahmedabad, the crowd swelled to about 100,000 people. By the time they finally reached Dandi, 50,000 supporters were waiting for them. And here's the real kicker.
Foreign journalists and cinema companies were there documenting every single step, broadcasting this massive spectacle of peaceful defiance to readers and viewers all across Europe and America. All right, Section 4, Breaking the Salt Law. On April 6, 1930, picture this. It's the morning of April 6, 1930. After finally arriving at the sea, Gandhi wades right into the water, reaches down, raises a lump of salty mud, and delivers this absolutely iconic line: "With this, I am shaking the foundations of the British Empire." He then literally boils the mud in seawater, producing illegal salt. In that one simple, highly publicized act, he officially broke the law. The spark had been struck, and mass civil disobedience erupted across the entire country. Get this, 1,600 rupees. That is what a single pinch of the illegal salt Gandhi made that morning actually sold for, which was equivalent to about $750 at the time. Salt instantly transformed from just a basic mineral into this sacred symbol of freedom. And what's deeply significant here is that this specific act brought women into mass participation in the freedom struggle for the very first time. Activists like Usha Mehta later recalled how women, grandmothers, and aunts would just proudly boil salt water right in their homes and shout out, "We have broken the salt law." Of course, the empire struck back. By the end of the month, the British government had jailed a staggering 60,000 Indians. They implemented intense censorship, they declared organizations illegal, the whole shebang. And yet, the civil disobedience relentlessly continued to spread. People boycotted British cloth, they refused to pay their taxes, and they defiantly just continued making and selling salt. Which takes us to Section 5, the Dharasana Satyagraha, the ultimate test. Now, Gandhi had planned a raid on the Dharasana salt works, but he was arrested in the middle of the night before he could lead it. So leadership fell to the poet and freedom fighter Sarojini Naidu, and before the marchers faced this line of heavily armed police constables, she issued these absolutely harrowing instructions. You must not use any violence under any circumstances. You will be beaten, but you must not resist. You must not even raise a hand to ward off blows. What followed was a scene of staggering discipline and just awful brutality. It was captured by United Press journalist Webb Miller. The marchers walked calmly into steel-tipped clubs. They were beaten unconscious, their skulls fractured, and yet, exactly as they had been trained, not a single one of them raised an arm to fight back. Miller's uncensored story was published in 1,350 newspapers around the globe. This single event, broadcast for the whole world to see, completely shattered whatever moral legitimacy the British Empire still claimed to hold over India. Finally, Section 6, a lasting global legacy, inspiring the world. Look, it is true that the Salt March didn't magically win immediate independence that very day, but it did something arguably much more important. It fundamentally transformed the mindset of the Indian people. It taught them self-reliance and proved beyond a doubt that the British ruled only by their consent. It proved the incredible power of Satyagraha. And decades later, it directly influenced global civil rights giants like Martin Luther King Jr., proving that nonviolent resistance could be a potent, truly unstoppable force for social reform anywhere in the world. So this leaves us with a final thought for today's explainer. The Salt March showed us that the tools to change the world don't always look like traditional weapons. Sometimes they look like a simple pinch of salt. It really makes you wonder about our own world today. What ordinary necessity right now holds the power to spark a modern revolution? Think about that for a bit, and remember the immense world-changing power of focused, non-violent collective action. Thanks for joining me.